achieved.
You know, you might not be a big fan. I'm a big fan of Michael Bisping, but you got to take your hat off to the guy coming in and on 3 weeks' notice after losing his title, getting submitted, stepping up to replace Anderson Silva and fighting a very difficult fight against Calvin Gastelum. Here's a fighter who's basically on the end of his career. He's coming off a very difficult loss, and yet he recognized an opportunity to help the company out, put some coin in his pocket, and just do the right thing and take a fight on short notice and get in there and fight, because that's what he does. And I've been a fan of him for a very long time, not always, but certainly for a long time. And this just makes me grow. I mean, my respect for a fighter like him grow that much more. You know, same thing. You got Jose Aldo. Now, he's openly said he's not thrilled about fighting for the title on short notice, but he's stepping up to replace Frankie Edgar and fight Max Holloway for the title. Huge opportunity, obviously. But at the same time, you look at it from the other point of perspective. If he loses that bout, now he's 0-2 against the champion, and his potential for getting a title fight in the future is very limited, and he will most likely be forced to, you know, wait out his chance to fight for the championship should the title change hands, or go up to lightweight and compete there. Marlon Moraes calling to face Jimmy Rivera after picking up a victory over John Dodson. Rivera, of course, was pegged to face Dominic Cruz. Cruz pulled out with an injury, or forced out with an injury. And again, Moraes calling the fight. I hope it happens. I think it's a great fight. Definitely want to see that take place. Either way, my hat's off to every fighter who steps up on short notice and takes a fight. At the same time, you get other fighters who tend to just kind of, you know, just kind of hover around and really do nothing. And they're waiting for their opportunity to fight, and they're just not in there. Guys like Conor McGregor. You know, Nate Diaz is the current situation now. It's rumored he's going to get an opportunity to fight for the title, or fight at some point for in a fight of significance in the not too distant future. Khabib Nurmagomedov's another one where it seems like he just kind of sits and waits and waits and waits and waits, and eventually gets a fight handed to him. But either way, I like these guys who grab the bull by the horns, and jump right in there and get their opportunity to fight in a high profile bout, and that's fantastic. And the way I look at things is, if you see something you really want, you got to go for it, because you don't know when that opportunity will ever be presented to you again. If it will ever be presented to you again, you just got to go for it. You got to reach out there. You got to grab it. You got to take it and not let go. And yeah, that opportunity only comes around once in a while in life, so go for it, people. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. Always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night 121, which will take place in Sydney, Australia, and feature 6 main card fights, including the main event of Fabricio Werdum, the former heavyweight champion, taking on fast-rising Marcin Tybura. I'll be giving you all my main card predictions on this episode of the show. As always, my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Also available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, my bet packs, which are coming off a fairly decent showing. I went 8-5 last weekend, but I picked up a number of solid victories. I had a couple one-offs. I was just one leg short of making it a huge payday. But still, with the big bankroll, we walked away with 8.36 units in profit, winning 35 units, just short of 36. But it was the big risk, big reward that really paid off. We won 86.77 units, betting 28. So we took home approximately 58.77 units in profit. That's pretty solid. That's pretty decent. And again, it's all about, you know, highs and lows with my strategy of betting. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. It's just the way it rolls out. I know some people are like, oh, you gotta grind it out. Some people don't want to grind it out. Some people want to take risks every show, and that's what I produce and put out there for them. Either way, if you want to buy the bet pack, you can get it for $15, or you can subscribe to the final, 7 or 8 events left in 2017. You can do that and save yourself, you know, maybe $30. It's almost like getting 2 free bet packs. On that note, we've got a lot of fights to predict, so let's get to that first main card prediction. The opening fight of the night takes place in the UFC's featherweight division as Alexander the Great Volkanovski, 15 wins, 1 loss, takes on the debuting and short notice replacement Shane Young, currently carrying a record of 11 victories and 3 defeats. This is actually the third opponent change for Volkanovski. Jeremy Kennedy, the Canadian, was originally scheduled to face him. Humberto Bandai was the second opponent that was scheduled to step in. And now Shane Young is taking this opportunity to jump into the UFC with just 7 days to prepare. Physically, Shane is 2 inches taller, and he's actually going to he's 5 years younger than Volkanovski. Now, looking at Alexander, first, he has won 12 consecutive fights, including the 2-0 start to his UFC career, and he has a solid win over Mizuto Hirota in his last appearance. Young comes into the matchup having won 5 consecutive bouts. He did lose a 2015 decision to current UFC roster fighter Damien Brown, which is probably his most noteworthy fight. His last 3 opponents, unfortunately, have a combined record of 6 wins and 9 losses, so both low and limited quality of opposition, and you know those guys have limited experience as well. Looking at Young's numbers first, he has 5 wins by knockout, 4 wins by submission. He's 2-3 on the scorecards, 8 first-round victories, and overall he's 3-3 in fights to go beyond the first round. So certainly not a great record for a fighter coming off the regional scene. In the cage, he has a decent left jab. He'll double it up. He's fairly active with his striking. He follows with an overhand right, and he will target the body with a jab and some hooks. He has a tendency to sit in the pocket. He uses head movement, likes to slip off to the side when punching, but he tends to be a little bit hittable as well, and holds his chin up a little bit higher, and I'd like to see him do that. As far as going to the mat, he will drop for a single leg. And in one of his most recent fights, I really liked the way he rotated to his opponent's back and sunk in a rear naked choke pretty quick. Actually, it was pretty concerning. If you go back and watch that footage, I think it was his last victory, the fighter tapped on several occasions when he was being choked out. The ref stood there and didn't move, and it's just poorly educated. He didn't understand what was going on. And again, you get a lot of that in the regional scene. The ref stood there and watched him tap on multiple occasions. There was no, oh, is he trying to get it? It was clearly a tap, did nothing. The fighter passed out, and then you saw the inexperience of the referee, because instead of breaking the hold, he simply waved it off and stood over the top of the fighter who's still choking him out. And I talked to a friend of mine who's been in competitions, and she said, hold that submission until the referee tells you to stop, because you don't know. And in this situation, Young held on to it. It was unfortunate, but hey, the referee didn't give him much of a choice. And, he got the victory, but still, you never want to see that happen. Looking at Volkanovski first, he put up a nice combo of strikes and takedowns in his last fight, landing 87 significant strikes, go along with 4 takedowns. Some of those strikes obviously coming on the mat. He throws a big overhand right, which he knocked out his first opponent with. He also mixes in some hard low kicks. Generally speaking, he's hit that bruiser, that physical bruising type of fighter. He will look for takedowns early and often. He's a pretty good level change. He mixes in a leg trip when he gets the opportunity. And from the outside, he can shoot fairly effectively. He's a powerhouse, so he knows how to blow through guys and put them on the mat. Once on the ground, look for him to try and pass guard very quickly. He wants to posture up and land that big ground and pound, and he does a lot of good work from half guard once he gets there and kind of controls guys. A lot of fighters, they'll move out of guard and they'll get in that half guard position, and they won't look to advance any further because they feel they can control their opponents from that position better and land strikes and do damage. He has excellent heavy chest pressure when he's on top. When he's in the clinch, he'll land knee strikes, force his opponent to the ground from that position. But he'll also use short elbows, and just can do a lot of damage controlling them and busting them up. Now, he can be taken down. We've seen a couple occasions where he's been taken down, but he gets up fairly quickly. His scrambling is a bit of a question mark. He can lose position. We've seen that a couple of times, and that can cost him against a solid grappler. But in this fight, I think it's just too much too soon for Young. Short notice debut, huge step up in competition. Most of his fights are short, which never bodes well for coming against that top level guy. You can't get him out of there quickly. How does he fare mentally? How does he hold up? Volkanovski needs to avoid taking him too lightly, though, and not be thrown off by the multiple opponent changes. But either way, my prediction is Alexander Volkanovski to defeat Shane Young by TKO. Fight number 2 in the main card features Elias the Spartan Theodoro fighting out of Canada, 14 wins and 2 losses, taking on everyone's favorite underdog, Daniel Kelly, currently holding a record of 13 wins and 2 defeats. Now, Kelly, as I said, he's been the big Cinderella story in his UFC run. He had won 4 consecutive bouts inside the octagon, including defeating former light heavyweight champion Rashad Evans. For Theodoro, who's coming off a very close loss to Brad Tavares, he had won back-to-back fights over Cesar Ferreira and Sam Alvey. Theodoro, 1 inch taller, 5 inch reach advantage, and he's the younger man by 11 years. Now, the big question here we look at first is, has the clock struck midnight for Daniel Kelly? He's 4-1 in the UFC when fighting at home in Australia, and interestingly enough, Theodoro is 1-2 when fighting in the UFC outside of Canada. So certainly a home field advantage for Kelly. But yeah, again, going back to the initial question, has he kind of run his course? And that loss to Derek Brunson signifying he's at his end as far as pulling off upsets and making waves in the UFC. Kelly obviously comes from that judo background. He's a very gritty fighter. He likes to stick around, wear on opponents, slow them down, keeps moving forward, and they almost underestimate him to the point where it's like, oh, he can't do this, and eventually he's winning the fight, and there's not much you can do. When he fought Antonio Carlos Jr., he lost that opening round, but Carlos Jr. got faded, and Kelly stopped him. Same thing against Chris Camozzi. Camozzi had a decent start, but Kelly, again, just kept right in his face, kept moving forward. Camozzi broke, which is hard to do. Chris Camozzi's a tough guy to break, and Kelly did, and eventually took that fight as well. Kelly's willing to take shots to land them. He's not a pretty striker. He's not overly fleet of foot, but again, he's willing to stand there. He's willing to trade. And he's just a tough old dude. He throws a decent right jab or right hook and then slips off to the right and throws a left down the middle, which is a very effective technique. Again, it's simple, but it works. He throws a lot of short punches, mixes in uppercuts as well. And when he can get inside on his opponent, again, using that judo background, he can do some damage at close range. He is hard to take down. Evans was getting in deep on a couple of shots, and Kelly defended them very well and got out of there. And again, he's very strong in that clinch position. He's got the upper body clinch, looks for trips and takedowns from that spot. And generally speaking, he's just a lot to handle. Now, on the other side of things, you've got Elias Theodorou. Averages 3.11 strikes landed per minute versus 1.74 strikes absorbed. So it's a good striking ratio. He uses a lot of movement, a lot of kicks to keep distance, but he doesn't have a heck of a lot of power. We're not seeing him stop guys with one-punch power. When he does, it's usually accumulation of damage. But I also question his connection rate. I see a lot of awkward striking out of Elias where it's just... he's throwing stuff, it's not landing, or it's not landing as effectively as it should be. You know, he keeps a good pace and pressure, but again, and he's a decent grappler overall. He's at his best when you use that clinch, but his range striking is a little bit concerning. It looks better than it actually is. He does use the clinch when he can jam opponents up on the inside and kind of control them, but again, it's not something that against every fighter it's going to work. It didn't work against Thiago Santos because Santos was so dangerous from the clinch, and I wonder if it's going to work here against a guy like Daniel Kelly, who's got that judo background and is very strong in the position as well. Elias, if he is forced to work from the outside, again, he throws those singles with a lot of setup, and he's awkward, doesn't land as much as he can. He will use takedowns when he gets the opportunity, but he's got away from that. 8 takedowns over his first 3 fights, only 5 over his last 4, and that includes 3 in his last fight, which he just didn't do enough with and lost a decision. You know, Elias has success outworking fighters who are not known for big offensive outbursts, who kind of coast along. He's able to just be more active. I think Kelly's going to make this fight ugly. He's going to push forward. He's going to land the better strikes here. They might not be flashy, but they're going to be impactful, and he's going to have a lot of success in that clinch, whether it be offensively or defensively in preventing Elias from landing his offense from that position. And I think it's one of those fights where it's just, you see Theodoro starting out strong, and Kelly just sticks around, and eventually gets the better of him. And my prediction is Daniel Kelly to defeat Elias Theodoro by decision. Fight number 3 on the card takes place in the UFC's welterweight division as Australia's own Celtic Kid Jake Matthews takes on Serbian steel Bojan Velickovic. Now, Matthews was a big lightweight. He's moving up to welterweight for this matchup. He's a younger guy, so you have to wonder is maybe making that weight becoming more and more difficult as he fills out and becomes more physically defined or finished, if you will. For Bojan, he's coming off a decision loss to Darren Till. We see where Darren Till is at right now and climbing with the win over Donald Cerrone. Velickovic has 2 wins, 2 losses, and a draw inside the octagon. Now, Bojan is actually he's the taller man by 3 inches. He'll have a 4-inch reach advantage, which isn't surprising for Matthews, but he is 6 years younger. Matthews is the younger man by 6 years. Now, looking at Jake first, he's been out of action for a year. He has lost back-to-back fights, including a contentious split decision to Andrew Holbrook, where Holbrook was very active on the mat and stole a decision that Matthews probably could have won. Jake, for the most part, has worked behind his wrestling, but he landed 3 takedowns in that Holbrook loss and just didn't do enough with it and got outworked. He's still very green. He's a work in progress, and when you're rounding yourself out at the highest level, there's going to be a learning curve. You're going to lose some fights as you look to try and improve. And conversely, when you look at Bojan Velickovic, he has given up a takedown in each of his UFC fights, amounting to 9 over 5 appearances. He can work off his back, he can get up, but you're playing with fire in those situations. If you get taken down too often, it's going to cost you. Now, for Matthews, all of his wins, for the most part, have come on the mat. Trio of submission victories, 1 doctor stoppage victory from ground and pound, 4 submissions by rear naked choke overall. Conversely, all his defeats have also come on the mat. Submitted by James Vick, TKO'd by Kevin Lee. He lost on The Ultimate Fighter to Olivier Aubin-Mercier on the mat. And he also, coming off a decision loss, Andrew Holbrook, where I said Holbrook just outworked and was the more aggressive grappler on the floor despite a positional disadvantage at times. Matthews' striking is still very much a work in progress. He's got a good right hand. We saw him crack Johnny Case with a very hard body kick, which really turned that fight on its head, and a fight that Case was probably winning. Matthews does have a tendency to rush in a little bit too much at times, and he will make some mistakes as a result. Case put him in some bad spots. Lee put him in some bad spots as well and eventually finished him because of Matthews' lack of defensive focus. Now, Velickovic, he should have the edge in the feet. He's got a better, superior reach. He works his jab very well, and he's got a pretty good kicking attack to work behind as well. He needs to make it very difficult overall for Matthews to get in, to close that distance and get in and land takedowns or work in the clinch. And those weapons, the kicks and the jab, will be essential to that. Matthews has issues with fighters that will challenge him in the grappling department as well. Even when scoring takedowns, he will give up position at times. And again, Holbrook capitalized on his lack of control on the mat, which is something that I think Bojan Velickovic can take advantage of as well. I think the size of Bojan is going to create problems. Bojan has slowed in fights, but so has Matthews as well. And you wonder if that's the impact of the weight cut taking its toll. Either way, in this matchup, I think Bojan is going to defend the takedowns, make Matthews keep working, and we're going to see Velickovic have a lot of success at distance, maintaining that outside reach, kicking and jabbing his way, outpointing Matthews. It's concerning picking against a guy like Jake Matthews in Australia, but again, and how does Bojan hold up in that tough situation? But my prediction is Bojan Velickovic to defeat Jake Matthews by decision. Up next, we have a very interesting welterweight matchup featuring Tim the Dirty Bird Means, 27 wins, 8 losses, and 1 draw, along with a single no contest, taking on Belal, remember the name Muhammad, with a current record of 12 wins and 2 defeats. Now, this fight was originally expected to feature Jesse Taylor, the Ultimate Fighter winner, taking on Muhammad. Taylor was yanked from the fight for potentially failing a drug test or being notified he could. Means stepping in on just over a month's notice to prepare for this matchup. Now, Muhammad is coming off back-to-back wins over Jordan Mean and Randy Brown after a violent knockout at the hands of Vicente Luque. For Means, he beat Alex Garcia after a submission loss to Alexander Oliveira, which was preceded by a no contest against Oliveira in a fight that Means was very much winning until landing an illegal blow. So kind of an interesting sequence of events there. Physically, Means 3 inches taller over 3-inch reach advantage. Belal is the younger man by 4 years. Now, there are multiple scenarios I'm going to look at in this matchup. First and foremost, Means has brutal knockout power, and he has that lethal striking skills in which he can deliver it with. Conversely, Muhammad has a chin that's very vulnerable and certainly has been cracked in the past. Means 18 wins by knockout overall, including KOing 3 of his last 5 victims that he's defeated. He offers a wide variety of striking techniques in which to deliver that knockout power, whether it be his clinch game with knees and elbows, kicking game at distance. He's also got tight boxing from the outside, tight boxing from the inside. He can do a lot of damage in a variety of positions. Even on the mat, he can stop guys if he can build up enough damage. Now, we saw Muhammad knocked out violently by Vicente Luque, but he was also hurt on multiple occasions by Alan Jouban, who simply couldn't put him away, but he knocked him down a couple of times and had him in a lot of trouble. Now, Muhammad's a decent defensive striker, which is shocking, but at the same time, he's still hittable, which is kind of a juxtaposition. But I think he's got a compact front, but again, he still exposes himself and has been cracked on multiple occasions. Now, scenario number 2, that actually favors Muhammad. When you look at things, he has that, Means' takedown defense is a question mark. He's very vulnerable on the mat, and Muhammad's got exceptionally underrated wrestling. Means has been submitted 4 times in his career, including each of his last 2 defeats. He has a 62% takedown defense, but he's been taken down on 13 occasions over his last 6 fights. So opponents are recognizing a vulnerability and capitalizing on it, and you have to wonder if Muhammad's not going to look to do something like that. Now, Means can get up. He will force his opponents to work very hard looking for takedowns, but again, he can be planted on his back, and we've seen him lose multiple fights because of that issue. Muhammad, when you look at his numbers, he's landed multiple takedowns in all but one of his UFC fights, including 4 against Jordan Mean in his last matchup, 2 against Randy Brown, the one fight prior. So again, he has the skills to exploit Means' vulnerability. Scenario number 3 is Means has a tendency to be a little bit hesitant with his strikes. Not so much lately, but certainly he has had issues in the past. And his gas tank, can he keep pushing in a gritty, demanding fight? Means, I says, he's picked up the pace of late, but he's not nearly as conservative. And with Belal being hittable, that's going to encourage Means to push forward and attack. But at the same time, Belal, he has the ability to outpoint him, push forward, and be the busier fighter. So that's certainly something. If Means does not pick up the pressure and pick up the pace early, he could get himself in some trouble if he falls behind the scorecards, especially if you combine that with the takedown issues. Now, when you look at how this fight can be won, Belal needs to outpoint Means, most likely combining his striking efficiency with some takedowns for a decision victory. Conversely, Means can win a fight with a decision by simply being the more impactful and active striker. He can win it with a knockout by obviously knocking out Belal Muhammad. I think the reach and technique of Means is going to be the big issue here. Unless Belal can find a lot of consistent success with his wrestling, I don't think he's going to be able to do enough. And I think we're eventually going to see Tim Means find his chin. And my prediction is Tim Means to defeat Belal Muhammad by knockout. In the co-main event of the evening, we moved to the women's flyweight division as Rowdy Beck Rawlings, 7 wins and 6 losses, takes on the debuting Jessica Jo Rose Clark, 7 wins, 4 losses, and 1 no contest. She's also known in the MMA world as Jessie Jess. Rose Clark is stepping in to replace JoJo Calderwood, who pulled out on November 5th. Rose Clark has approximately 2 weeks to prepare for this matchup. But it's interesting to note she took her last fight on 2 weeks' notice and had a lot of success winning a decision in that matchup. Now, I said this is a flyweight fight. They're still looking to crown a champion coming off the Ultimate Fighter. I think the winner will be in a position to potentially contend for a title shot once that champion is set. It certainly puts them in a good position as the rankings will come out. So either way, it's a big fight. We know what Joanna Jędrzejczyk did, winning fights not on the Ultimate Fighter and putting herself in a position to contend for the title once the show is finished. We could see something similar here. Now, Rose Clark, she fought twice in Invicta, losing both matchups. She's had issues making weight in the past, and taking this fight on short notice could be an issue. She's coming off a decision loss to Sarah Kaufman, who fights at bantamweight, so that's worth noting as well. That's a big fight. She held her own. That was her second last fight. She held her own in that matchup, but still, that's a big experience builder. But again, it's concerning if she's fighting at that weight because it's a better weight class for her, or she's just because she wanted to take a fight. Either way, Jessie has 2 wins by knockout, 2 submission victories. She's 3-4 on the scorecards. 3 or more rounds. She's gone 3 or more rounds in 9 of her 12 fights. So that's encouraging as far as her cardio is concerned. Now, when you look at her striking skills, she's got a pretty good stance. She keeps her hands up, solid foot positioning. She slides in and out of range very well, and she throws a lot of feints to throw off her opponent. She throws an excellent left jab. She has some decent power in her right hand, and she'll throw a beautiful counter left hook as her opponent. Beautiful, maybe not beautiful, but still effective counter left hook as her opponent's push forward. And in her last fight against Karina Dam, she chewed her legs up with hard low kicks and really did a lot of damage, and I like to see that out of a fighter. Take away your opponent's base and everything else will fall into place. Didn't mean to make that rhyme. When she fought Dam, I said she did a lot of damage to that lower kick, chewed her up, and that's something she should look to do in a lot of her fights is capitalize on that, crack away, and take away their base. She showed decent grappling defense in the past. She stays vertical fairly well, got up when Dam took her down, but eventually she got her back taken. She worked out of the position eventually, but again, it's something you don't want to be doing too often. When you look at Rawlings, she's a decent offensive striker, averaging 4.13 strikes landed per minute, but she's also quite hittable, giving up 4.79 strikes absorbed per minute. That's a negative striking exchange rate. That's not a good number. When she fought Seohee Ham had a lot of success cracking her 92 times. Tisha Torres put up 81 strikes in her last fight. So she's, again, very hittable. She works behind a left jab when she's doing her best. She'll mix in an uppercut. She's got a decent left or right hook. She'll throw both of them. Push kick down the middle. Not a lot of pop behind her push kick, but again, it's there to be had or teep. It's more of a rangefinder, if anything. I don't like the way she pushes forward behind her offense. She leads with her face at times when she's trying to track her opponents down. She had a lot of trouble tracking down and hitting Tisha Torres. And Heather Jo Clark was countering with some straight shots down the middle when Beck would push forward behind those, attempts to land those flurries. She can clinch and dirty box, land short uppercuts on the inside and some knee strikes, which are one of her more effective techniques. She has a tendency to give up takedowns at key moments, and again, it's a major point of concern. If she gives up a takedown in a close fight, what's that going to do? Rawlings will slow down. That could be an effect of the weight cut to 115 pounds. We'll see if that doesn't affect her here to 125 pounds as much. I think overall Rose Clark is more technically sound, so Beck needs to be aggressive, keep in her face, and really make this a dirty fight. Make her feel the jitters, the short notice effect. Both girls are from Australia, which certainly helps as far as with Jessie Jess coming in on short notice. I think Jess is going to use her jab, counter strike to catch Beck pushing forward. She'll lose those low kicks to certainly slow her down. I think it's a close fight. Both girls have poor records and decisions. I think Jess stays technical. She'll do enough to edge it out, and my prediction is Jessica Rose Clark to pull off the upset and defeat Beck Rawlings by decision, possibly a split. Moving now to the main event of the evening, we are in the UFC's heavyweight divisions. The former champion and number 2 ranked fighter in the division, Fabricio Werdum, with a current record of 21 wins, 7 losses, and 1 draw, takes on the 8th ranked Marcin Tybura with a current record of 16 wins and 2 defeats. Now, Werdum was actually brought in to replace Mark Hunt, there's been a lot of issues with the UFC. It's kind of getting ugly, and Mark Hunt not happy about the scenario. Either way, he was yanked from the fight, and Fabricio moved into the matchup. Now, Tybura is coming off a big win over Andrei Arlovski, obviously and easily the highest profile fight of his career. He has won 3 in a row since losing to Timothy Johnson in his debut. For Werdum, he subbed Walt Harris very quickly in his last fight. That was supposed to be against Derek Lewis. Walt Harris stepped up and took the fight, and Werdum made it quick work, but again, it's a big notch in Walt Harris's belt to at least say I took a shot at the champ, and our former champion didn't get there. Prior to that, Werdum had that loss to Alistair Overeem, which certainly slowed his roll a bit as he tries to get back to a title shot against Stipe Miocic or whoever is the champion at the time. Fabricio Werdum 1 inch taller than Tybura. Tybura will have a 1 inch reach advantage, and Marcin is the younger fighter by 8 years. Now, Werdum is, as I said, he's trying to get back to that opportunity to fight for the title, and Overeem, that loss certainly hurt, but a loss here against Tybura would be significantly more damaging because Overeem is another top contender, a guy who's also fought the title recently, and a guy who actually had a recent victory over Fabricio when you go back to Strikeforce. Tybura is a prospect on the rise, looking for his opportunity, but he's certainly not there yet. A victory over Werdum changes that. As much as it helps Tybura, it equally, if not more so, devastates Verdum's future opportunity to fight for a championship. But again, in the heavyweight division, anything can happen. Anybody can get an opportunity with a win or two. Looking at Fabricio first, his success, and we've talked about this all the time when we break down his fights, his success and recent success and rise to the title has come largely on his ability to become a multifaceted fighter. He's always been an elite-level BJJ player, black belt, arguably the best grappler in the UFC's heavyweight division, probably the best grappler in the UFC's heavyweight division. But he's become a very capable and, to the point, a dangerous striker. He's added that to his repertoire. And you look at his numbers, he averages 3.42 strikes landed per minute, pretty solid for a heavyweight, but he's put up some big numbers in recent fights. Against Travis Brown, he put up 121 in the first fight, 84 in the second fight. Against Cain Velasquez, he landed 96. He has really put up some solid totals for heavyweights. And every time you're closing on that 100 mark, that century mark in strikes landed, you're doing your job as a big man. We saw, and the interesting thing with Fabricio, he's very creative and he's very willing to attempt things. We saw the flying kick to the face against Brown. He'll throw a cartwheel kick. He'll try anything because he knows fighters don't want to go to the mat with him. He's so talented on the ground. It's just an area that they do not want to test themselves. And on the off chance they do, like for example, we saw Fedor Emelianenko, they dive into his guard. It's a win for him. He could submit them and the fight's over. More conventionally, he has good power in his right hand. He throws some hard low kicks. He'll work a push kick in the middle, and he attacks in the clinch very effectively using elbows and especially those knees. Now, at the same time, Fabricio has a tendency to move forward way too aggressively. He walked into that knockout against Stipe that cost him the title after getting hit once or twice prior to the knockout blow. He's too loose with his defense. His hands are down. He will push forward way too aggressively at times, which can open him up to counter strikes and get him in a little bit of trouble. At the same time, again, we know how good he's improved on the feet. He's dynamite on the mat. If he can get the fight to the ground, you are in serious trouble. Again, against Walt Harris, he locked on that armbar and finished him relatively quickly. If he gets you to the ground, you are in serious trouble, and that's something that Tybura has to be very wary of. Now, for Marcin, he's picked up around 50 significant strikes in each of his 3 fights that went into the third round or went the distance. One of them ended in the third round. So he's a decent offensive output guy, but he's not going to overwhelm you with just his volume. He has to have some significant strikes mixed in there as well. His striking is improving. He throws a lot of kicks, front kick to the face and body. He's got a decent right hand, and he tends to be a bit of a chopper with his strikes. They're not smooth, fluid strikes at times, and it can be effective, but at the same time, it's not very pretty to watch. And sometimes guys who take a quicker, shorter route to the point of contact will beat him to the punch. He throws a left jab. He'll also throw a short straight right. He'll fire an overhand, short straight left. He'll fire an overhand right as well to follow in. He will lead with his left predominantly. And, he stays fairly active with his punching technique, but again, he's not putting up those big numbers. Arlovski had some success in that middle frame. It looked like he was turning that fight in his favor with his striking advantage, and that shows that Tybura might not quite be there at that top level. When he fought Victor Pesta and knocked him out, he threw out a quick 1-2 and then finished with a brutal head kick, which is very impressive. It shows he has power. And again, we know Fabricio's chin's not perfect. He can be knocked out, and if Tybura lands one of those big head kicks, he could pick up a huge upset. We've also seen Tybura, he'll mix in some stepping knees from distance, and he'll throw in some knees from the clinch as well. And that clinch game is a solid attack that he can look for takedowns from. He took Arlovski down and kept him there with some, once he got on the mat, he has some nice trip takedowns as well. We saw that against Luis Henrique, where he was able to overwhelm him from top position with strikes. Henrique exhausted in that fight as well. But on the flip side, Henrique had a lot of success, and so did Timothy Johnson, a lot of success controlling him in the clinch. Tybura is a BJJ brown belt. He's got some good chops on the ground. He's got some good takedown defense overall. But he's the type of guy who can be tied up, whether it be in the clinch or can be put on the ground if tested. And I don't like the way he tends to turn over when getting back up. He exposes his back, and against Fabricio, Werdum will jump on that, and he will look for a finish. Overall, Tybura's had issues with the clinch and being on the mat, and Werdum certainly could attack him there. Or at the least, Marcin won't be able to take him down. And that's certainly a question mark, because when he beat Andre Arlovski, a lot of it came on his strength ability to take him down in rounds 1 and 3. He's not going to have that against Fabricio unless Fabricio gets absolutely exhausted, and I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Verdum's aggression on the feet will give him a big edge. His technique, he's got a little bit more refined technique, a little bit more varied striking attack. Even if there's no ground game for Fabricio, I think he wins this fight with standing. But I think at some point we're going to see him get the fight to the mat, as we've seen Tybura taken down before. Tybura is untested in 5-round fights, so it could be due to exhaustion. It could just be due to the Werdum getting him on the mat. Either way, my prediction is Fabricio Werdum to defeat Marcin Tybura by submission. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 121 in Sydney, Australia. All my preliminary picks, as is always the case, will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so please check them out. Gosh, it just keeps rolling. We are very busy right to the end of the year pretty much, so hopefully we can turn it around. I'm still going in search of 300 victories in a calendar year. I'm going to have to put it's still possible this year. I have to really put a solid effort in. I can't have any slip-ups at this point. I got to be cracking 8 minimum wins a show, closer to 9 and 10 to make things a little more realistic. But either way, I'm very much looking forward to this card. It should be a fun card. There's some interesting fights on it. A couple fights that I already actually predicted, and we'll be going back and adding them to my already predicted once. They even push forward and we get to see them on this card. So either way, thank you as always for tuning in. Follow me on Twitter at Kamikaze KO_predictions. Kamikaze Overdrive is available on Facebook as well. You can check us out there. Make sure you get all the links first and foremost. And also our YouTube channel. You can check us out and search for us and subscribe there. Thank you as always for tuning in, people. Greatly appreciated. And I will talk to you later. Hi.